Yo, what's happening, world? My name's Raheem Flowers, and this is the third volume of my series, Enter the Mindset. We're going to enter the mindset of SWP, Sergeant Willie P, for those who don't know him. This is a man who grew up in the suburbs of Pennsylvania, hence the reason why I gave him a nickname, Suburban Whiny Pete, because he tends to go on these plethora of rants in the so-called black community, and he speaks from a place of a so-called educated black man. And I have my gripes with Sarge. I've been taking shots at the man since 2016. I've known about his content since 2015. This is a man who was a part of Generation X, and he's been making content since 2007. And now we're going to give an assessment of what he got to say about Cynthia G. Let's go.
I told myself I wasn't going to make a video about
Oh,
this.
sure. We knew you were going to make a video. This is your girl, Cybernetic G. You agree with 98% of what she says, so it's only natural that you made a video about her, Peter.
Some people I've talked to behind the scenes, and I told them I wasn't going to make a video about this.
Because one of the names happened to be Captain Solo, by the way.
And for one, I wanted to wait for all the facts to come out.
Because you're such a critical thinker, Sarge. That's why you get on black people for that. You're right, man. Let me continue, though, brother.
But from what I see with a lot of the videos that people are putting out, they want to shit on Cynthia G.
And you want a cape
call
for
her
her.
a hypocrite.
Let's continue, though.
And I see the problem as being a lot.
Is it deeper than the weed that she got stuck in her head? Legit question.
And it's not even a matter of me feeling vindicated or jumping up and down with an "I told you so." Right? Many of even the men making videos who have these sort of "I told you so" videos are followers of mine.
Oh, naturally. Because just like you, those niggas are a bunch of disgruntled simps. So I expect that to be the case. You're not saying something that's surprising. Nothing shocking there, Sarge.
Much of the content that they put out and a lot of the stuff they say, is a reflection of stuff that I've said, or they've grabbed bits and pieces and they go and
See?
they give their own
You just
commentary.
admitted it. Yeah, disgruntled simp, suburban whiny Pete. Back at it with the shenanigans.
But most people know where it came from or where it comes from, right? I've made the argument over the years several times that a lot of black women do.
Yeah, because the likes of simp ass niggas like you exist. And many plethora that grow up in these single mother household exist. And those who are trying to get brownie points to get some pussy. Like the Drakes of the world. But let's continue.
Whatever their reasons may be, it's what they want to do. I've been criticized, I've been attacked for, and I've had people defend me by other people who wanted to attack me on laying a lot of the accountability for certain things in the black community squarely at black women's feet. And it's been argued that it is weak for a black man such as myself to attack black women on the issue and not attack black men on the issue.
Let me say this. There are certain degrees of it that I do agree with Sarge when he said that. It ultimately falls on the black man in any society. when it comes to maintaining, when it comes to building, when it comes to having some form of order. And when you don't have that strong masculine principle and energy emitting around the area, guess what happens? You have these bastardized bastard children. And then you have these simps like Sarge, like Boyce Watkins, and that buff dude who used to be on TED, Theo Wilson. You got all these cats that exist, and they're the ones who are the gatekeepers for these wicked matriarchal minded broads. Let's just call it what it is. Y'all are the gatekeepers, you are the guardians, you are the white knights, as you describe yourself as. So, but I do agree with the fact that many black men out here just want to do this back and forth and having circular arguments, such as Sarge and his girlfriend, Hissy Chrissy, about where accountability lies and who's at fault and doing all this back and forth for what? We know that it ultimately falls on the black man, but at the same time, women are the gatekeepers when it comes to the family structure. But when it comes to the overall community and the decisions and the order or lack of, we got to look at ourselves and take accountability, personal responsibility for our actions and whatever erroneous, whatever fuck ups we make. Simple as that.
And a lot of times we get into this sort of blame game back and forth, of whose fault, who's at more fault in the black community for the current condition of the black community or the current condition of the black family structure. Right. And I look at certain populations of men in the black community as a constant. It's almost like how like religious people will jump up and down and they'll talk about being gay is a sin and people choose to be gay and all that other stuff. I don't believe that. I believe people are born gay. We know who
Wrong
we are.
answer, Sarge. I remember watching a video from the brother Judah, Chronicles of Judah 144. And there was a article out there speaking about there was a scientist who admitted that there is no evidence of a gay gene. Now, this is how it really is, or at least how I look at it. You see, when it comes to the whole dynamics of being a homosexual, it revolves around like a gender swap. And usually in the so-called black community, it's because a lot of these a lot of these males, a lot of these brothers out here grow up with their mothers, they grow up with their aunties, and I went to school with them, trust me, I know. And they emit that effeminate energy that they absorb from the women and their mothers, aunts, guardians, and the sisters that they're raised around. So it's an environmental factor. It's not a matter of it being a genetic factor because there is no empirical evidence of that to this very day. That's just there to fit an agenda. But I leave it to an atheist to say some bullshit like that. So much for critical thinking, Sarge.
First grade. Okay. Gay people have always been here since the beginning of time. Gay people will continue to be here.
Absolutely. They've been around since the time of the ancient Rome, Saturnalia, a bunch of pansexual shit. Been around ancient Greece, and the Babylonian society and what they refer to as Sodom and Gomorrah. But then again, you reject all those biblical references. So let me shut the fuck up right now, Sarge, and let me let you keep talking, brother.
The Ray Ray and Pookie types, the dusty beta males, whatever you want to call them, the fuck boys, they're always going to be a segment of the population. Now,
And Cybernetic G happened to get dicked down by that segment of the population, and it's a pseudo neo pro black Negro by the name of Robert Perkins. So whatever she says about coons and beta males, all she's doing is perpetuating the stereotype of black women, or the notion rather, that black women talk about black men ain't being shit. But then again, you latch on to these ain't shit dudes. You still follow that bullshit paradigm. So, hey, but let's continue to hear what Sarge got to say as he continues to cape and be objective.
I think that due to lack of infrastructure, consequences, this culture of everybody being able to do whatever the fuck they want to do, there not being any sort of, compelling ways to keep people in line, such as jobs and opportunities and resources that I talk about when it comes to other
But you know what
communities.
else you talk about, and a notion that you also reject? Pulling your pulling yourself on your bootstraps. You reject that notion because you like to emphasize on white supremacy. That's why you went and complained about Jared Taylor's minions in one of your videos. So, hey, which one is it, Sarge? Do we lay accountability on black men, or do we go and lay accountability on the white supremacists who put black men in that position? Which one is it? Because you can't have it both ways. Either we have accountability and we recognize the bullshit and we recognize that it's not an equal playing field all across the board, or we continue to have that victim black liberal bullshit mentality. And when I say black liberal, I'm not talking about politically, I'm talking about ideologically. That's what I'm talking about. And you fit it right to the T. The difference is that you put on this cloak of intellect, and you know, you do speak more critically about the so-called black community. But I digress.
Two ways to keep people in check and keep people in line. It's either with tangibles and opportunities, which currently the vast majority of black men and black elders in the black community don't control, or by force.
Okay, I agree with Sarge on that. But you got to actually take it by force, Sarge. You can't just be an internet revolutionary all day and talk about white supremacy and talk about all these all the privileges they get so caught up in that circular argument of colorism that you do. You got to take it by force, like you just said.
And see, this is where you get into the dark side of SWP. Because I look at societies throughout history, and I accept the ugly part of maintaining a society.
Sarge, do you also accept the ugly side of the so-called black man as well? What's here?
I sent uh, I sent Cap a link the other day, and it was about the Middle Ages and how the Middle Ages were, very. It was either the Middle Ages or the Dark Ages, whatever you want to call it. And how, the Europeans, and I already made a video about this, the video titled "They Don't Like Mirrors,"
They don't like mirrors.
in reference.
Yes, I also understand that these Caucasians do not like that mirror in front of them. I understand very well that that's why I would never bring up certain like people in history like Anthony Johnson or William Elson, or even speaking about the Barbary slave trade and the white slave trade when the Moors enslaved Turks and the Slavics and Eastern European white people. I'm not going to bring because that gives them an out. But at the same time, that's a reference point that the black man needs to make with each other, plain and simple. See, you can't want to make that type of argument and notion and apply it to one group and not apply it to yourself, Sarge. That's a blatant double standard. And by doing that, how are you any different from the white privilege and the white supremacists that you love to talk about? Because I've never heard Sarge specify a point in time in history where the black man has done things to make other black people fall short and be in the position that we ultimately find ourselves in at one point when we were in rulership. See how Tariq can boast about things in hidden colors and talk about when, oh, the Moors, and you have to understand, family, the Moors we were ruined in ancient Europe, and we got white people out of the Dark Ages, but then you don't want to talk about the ugliness, the obscenities that the Moors have done as well. Because not every black person in history was this omnibenevolent being that these pseudo neo pro blacks or even these older pro blacks try to make it seem like. Nah, you can't, like, there's always going to be a duality in things. You're always going to have a good sect of people in your community. You're always going to have those who do wicked things and harm others, plain and simple. But I don't know if Sarge Ray puts the mirror in everybody or just picks and chooses who he places that mirror on. But then again, I expect that from dudes who have that black liberal talking point, even if you don't claim to be that.
To white people's violent nature. But the article
White
talks
people's violent
about
nature.
how
And I had a conversation with a brother who was from New York. And shout out to Omar. It was a brother from New York, and he was talking about the Vandals and the Moors and referring to white people as the Vandals. And he was talking about white people learned everything. And they just took it to another level when it came to chattel slavery. You think white people just woke up one day and just said, man, like they just had this intrinsically in them? Nah, they learned. They learned from the best. They learned from the originator, man, the melanated brother. But that doesn't excuse anything white people did. Now white people are falling short because they wanted to align them, and the Caucasian Jews have aligned themselves to conspire against these Moors, against the black men. And now white people got the short end of the deal, and now they have to deal with opioids, lo and behold. But yeah, Sarge, you can't want to talk about one person's savagery while sidestepping the other. Yes, I get that Sarge has said critical things about black people, but he says these things as being a byproduct of white supremacy.
um, basically, white people, they constantly did all these sort of public executions, and I mean, they even had one story where like there was a
Oh,
criminal, he was
by
hung
the
in
way,
one
before I get off, you know, in ancient Europe, because I remember Sarge said this in a video on polished turd culture. This man said, "Oh, one of these white languages that your son knows in Spanish." You are aware that the black men have resided in Spain, and if you look back in history, there's a group of people called the Aurignacians that existed millenniums ago, thousands upon thousands of years, with melanated faces. You can look this shit up for yourself, and I'll send links too. But, I don't know how well informed Peter is on history because it just seems like he has that pro-black stance, but he doesn't proclaim to be that, even though his talking points is of that. Dramatic irony.
town, but then he had done a crime in another town, and then they stole the body and then rehung him, even though he was already dead, in the other town. And then the town that they stole the body from, they put up an effigy of his body, like a straw man, and then hung the effigy of his body to signify to basically the masses that you don't break the rules, and this is why, because this is what will happen to you. I mean, people forget that, the London Bridge used to have people's decapitated heads, on stakes, and they would be rotting in the sun, just, with crows plucking out the eyeballs and whatnot. But then the white people today, when you see, ISIS going out there with their belief system, which I don't agree with, but I'm saying with their belief system, decapitating people, crucifying people, sticking their heads on fences and everything else,
Oh, the funny
letting
thing about
people know.
ISIS is, I mean, they took that from the Egyptian goddess, or really a set. And we already know the history behind what the Arab Muslims have. Well, many people know about the history of what Arab Muslims have done when a little bit after Alexander the so-called Great showed up, and then all that intermixing and being indoctrinated with Islam. which is really just Satarian worship with the black stone known as al-Masuk. And I learned recently that al in Arabic actually means family. So who are you a family to? A clan. But yeah. So you bringing something like that up, that don't surprise me. Not at all.
If you go up against us, this is what
Let's
happens to
continue though
you. If you
before I
break our rules, this is what happens to you. If you break Islamic law, this is what happens to you. It's an example to let people know not to break the rules, don't fuck with us, do as we say, do as what the law says. And that's how communities maintain order in a society. Or more specifically, those who claim themselves to be the alpha males within that community maintain order in their patriarchal society. Cap and I constantly, over the years, have gotten into fights about this issue.
Is it really an
About
alpha
what do you
male
do?
thing to do, Sarge, when you've been ranting for 10 plus years and then you agree on 98% of what Cybernetic G says when she throws black men under the bus? Is that a man who really cares to establish a patriarchy? I think not. And as far as what I was saying about Islam, yeah, they maintain order. They follow those things from the Hadith, from the Sharia laws, and I'm not here to argue whether they're right or wrong about it. I mean, for all intents and purposes, when it comes to many of these so-called Arabs, there's not much violence that exists in Saudi Arabia or the United Arab Emirates outside of them treating their women like third-class citizens, but and imposing their will with Islam and the whole nine yard with that. Which, by the way, many of the so-called Moors or the black men who were a part of that so-called golden age of Islam, like I said, had a lot of sex slaves. So can't pick and choose things in history, Peter. If you're gonna talk about something, you talk about the whole thing. Yes, you have criticized the so-called black community, but obviously the fact that you've been at it for as long as you have and you only amass a certain amount of views shows that you haven't been effective in it.
What do you do about the R. Kellys in the community? What do you do about the Ray Rays and Pookies that are running around here getting women pregnant and everything else? Me, personally, I'm all about the purge. Take them the fuck out. You know, people say I make all these excuses for men and all this other shit and everything else. You
I
know,
don't know
why
if
do
you're
you
really all
address the
about the
women?
purge. That's
Why?
pretty questionable, Sarge. That's very questionable if you're really all about the purge. Considering that you, just like your boy Jason, the so-called Black Authority, are a bunch of Wizard Kelly ass niggas who don't even have enough temerity to show their faces and to show that you about some sort of revolution. Because you want to speak like a revolutionary, but all you do, it's like Lil Wayne said, them birds, all they do is, yeah, they sung, but they never flew. Always sung, never flew. That's you.
I address the women? Because I'm constantly told we can't take these motherfuckers out. You
He
can't
addresses
purge,
the
you
women
can't
because
kill.
he's a disgruntled simp. It's that simple.
You can't get rid of them. You can't make public examples of them. You can't do any of that, right? We live in America. We live in a civilized society, so we can't do that. Cap, on the other hand, and he could come in and chime in and write his commentary. Cap, on the other hand, thinks that you can lecture these motherfuckers. The Roberts out there. He thinks you can lecture them. That we should be admonishing them and criticizing them. Like, nigga, what the fuck is that gonna do? Certain individuals in the community would have to be taken the fuck
Hold
out.
on.
Period.
Wait a minute. Isn't that what you doing? Isn't that what you're doing right now? What a paradoxical statement that you made about your boy Captain Solo. God damn, Sarge. Talk about philosophical inconsistency.
You can't address the women. They're out of their mind, right? They're out of their mind. That's what I'm told. Why are you addressing the women? Why don't you address the men?
Unfortunately, the majority of women, especially in this cybernetic Babylon, definitely are out of their fucking mind. I definitely can agree on that. Majority, absolutely.
I already know that addressing men like that isn't going to do a fucking thing. Because that's what they do. You got to check them
You
by
know, it's kind
force.
of funny because when I listen to Judah, Judah's like the polar opposite of that, where he says that his channel is geared towards the so-called black men, as he always says. And I see that he amasses, I mean, I don't even want to play the numbers game, but there's always power in numbers. But the brother has almost 100,000 subscribers, while you don't even have 20,000. And I don't have that much myself either. I don't even have 500, but you've been at it for like over 10 years. So I have to think about that. I have to do the math in my head. That means you're not progressing. That means you're not progressing. At least I can say that I progressed over the years when I look at the amount of views and the reception I get and the people that, uh, you know, I've developed certain mutual respect from other brothers out there. I can at least say that. But when it comes to you, Sarge, you say that you address the women. What kind of manly thing is that to emphasize on the women more than you do the men? There's nothing wrong with going saying what you got to say about black women. I do it. Many brothers do it, and they bring up very valid, constructive points. But to emphasize on women, I told you, man, disgruntled simp shit. Let's continue. This guy just keeps letting you know he's just, the more he opens his mouth.
If you're not going to check them by force, well, I mean,
Do you
it's
check
just going to
Chrissy by
continue being
force?
what.
Peter? Sarge, do you check Cynthia G by force? Do you check Paris Milan by force? Did you ever check Sun Saray or any of these other broads by force? Or did you just have some sort of circular argument on Blog Talk Radio? You let me know.
Is if the women, there's nothing that's going to prevent the women from going off and getting with them. In my opinion,
See
Cynthia
what I'm
G can do what
saying?
the fuck she want
See
to
what
do.
I'm saying? God, man. See, I'm not just talking out my ass when I say this dude's is a disgruntled simp. Let's rewind a little bit, though.
Plenty of black women, they've done the same thing. They've done the exact same thing.
And that makes it okay
You
because
know,
many black women did the same thing. Many black women have done violent, brutal, obscene things just to get some weave. Does that make it okay? Many black women have gotten abortions, over 1 million. Hell, that even puts Hitler's numbers killing those Caucasian Jews in Germany. Shame. So what do you mean? I guess the whole other black women, it's almost like saying white women do it too, but it's like other black women do it too type of argument. You know, it's kind of an inverted argument. Anywho,
dusty beta males, black men that already got kids and everything else. It's the same reason. I was talking to somebody and said it's the same reason why a lot of these non-black women come over and fuck with black men, because black men don't have a structure. There's a lot of shit. I was talking to this Spanish woman, and she had what's funny, like it's like what people don't know, like with Spanish men, they're very patriarchal, machismo, all that other stuff, right? We gotta make more money than our wives, right? That's the patriarchal way, right? But what the Spanish woman told me is, not only did it happen to her, but it happened to her mother, where the Spanish man, he goes out there, and let's say he's not making that much money. What does he do? He tells his wife that she can't work so that he can maintain the patriarchal position, which goes into a whole different conversation, because it's like imagine having that conversation with a black woman. You can't work so that I can maintain my patriarchal position. Black women would completely object, right? It'd be all type of calls of sexism and everything else. But yet and still, when we go over and we look at the Hispanic community, the Latino community, right? Is the Latino community not more intact because they constantly do whatever it takes to maintain that sort of patriarchal structure, right? But it's like we already know
I
black women would
mean,
never go.
there's truth to what the man's saying right now. I'm not gonna sit here in front like there isn't, but Sarge is the type of individual who puts so much value on money. But then again, when you grow up in the suburbs, I naturally expect you to do some shit like that. You put so much emphasis and so much value on money. Don't get me wrong, money is an important aspect of life, but this is how I look at it. Money has become, to a certain degree, essential. But once you obtain a certain amount of money, you should develop certain skills so you become more self sufficient. Boom. A lot of people get complacent when they get to a certain stature and they get amass a certain amount of money. And, you know, sometimes there's not that generational wealth, and sometimes that falls short, or at other moments, people become too dependent on others or technology itself. So that's what I gotta say, because Sarge has a tendency to put a lot of emphasis on money. He's very dismissive of the spiritual aspect of things, which is why he rejects things like scriptures and he rejects things like deities and things of that nature. When really, when you speak about the things of spirits like daimons and angels and demons, and you speak about demigods and things of that such, it's just a way to look. You just use those figures and these things known as mythology as reference points to make your life better so you can get into a certain rulership and profits and whatnot. But I leave it to an atheistic dude like you to take that shit so literal to the next level. Even though there are hints and truths of these entities and things that go on. Hence the reason why there are things known as the Freemasonry. But anywho, let's continue.
Something like that. Even I have a problem with that. Like because I fail or because I lose a job or can't get a job, like I'm gonna tell my wife that she's not allowed to work so that I can feel good about my ego or something like that, right? So it's like a lot of women, they come over and they deal with black men because black men don't
And
have a
I
structure. There's
mean,
not a lot.
that doesn't make you any less of a man. It doesn't. Shoot, I've been around plenty of women who make more money than me. And I'm not ashamed to say that shit at all. But it's all about what are you willing to do? What are you willing to fight for? What are you trying to establish in the end? What are you in the process of building? Because that's what the important part is. Are you trying to obtain ownership? But I do agree with Sarge on you shouldn't just do, because that's just a fragile ego when a man expects a woman to leave a job because he's not working or she makes more than him. That's some egotistical shit, and motherfuckers need to get out their feelings if that's really the train of thought notion that they have.
That we give a fuck about. As long as we're getting pussy, like we're good, we're cool, right? And a lot of black women who don't like structure, don't like hierarchies, don't like patriarchy, want to do whatever the fuck they want to do, on top of the fact that their biological clock is ticking, and they've spent an enormous amount of time or wasted an enormous amount of time, you know, doing whatever it is that they do that is counterproductive to them being in the sort of relationship, because they want to completely ignore what men actually want out of marriage and what men actually desire. They want to fight all that, and then when they hit that 35 mark or older, and they realize that they got a very small window, they got about 5 years before that menopause starts kicking in, then they just rush to I want to pass go and collect $200, even though they didn't land on jail, they put
That's
themselves
why you
in
leave them
jail.
in the dust, Sarge. You let the wolves eat themselves. I don't bother dealing with this. Is why I have disassociated, severed my ties with the so-called black community. Been doing it for almost 5 years, since 2015. It's the best choice you can make until you get to a certain point and then you build a union with other black men who are like-minded and also have something that they want to offer the world and innovate. But for now, just let the wolves eat themselves. Stop worrying about black women so damn much. If pussy is not a number one priority on your list, Sarge, or getting women's approval is not a number one priority or top three priority on your list, then you're making moot points right now.
They want to move forward anyway, right? Because they don't like the structure. And dealing with these guys allows them to do that. These loose dick niggas, it allows them to do that. Marriage in traditional structure comes with a whole bunch of stuff that, I don't know, they've been socialized to not like, or they have these sort of feminist beliefs that they don't like. So single motherhood is perfect for them because they don't have to answer to a man. It's the same thing with getting money and resources from white zaddy and the federal government. They don't have to answer to a black man. When they get money from the government, they don't have to deal with the government. It doesn't interfere with their day-to-day interactions, right? It doesn't deal with the day-to-day operation of how she wants to
And
run her
now, as you
household
see in
and
this
run.
day and age, there's something known as the government shutdown. Trump is on motherfuckers now for that shit. You see, I don't have a problem with people who resided in public housing. It's the complicity aspect of it. And then you start to create this cycle of chaos, dysfunctionality, and just a lack of any type of respect or authority or order or anything of that nature because you grew up in this matriarchal environment. I mean, you could thank the Michelle Walses of the world. You could thank the Caucasian Jews like Gloria Steinem. You could thank the double agents known as Angela Davis. And you could thank the Dorothy Hughes. Man, oh man, such a shame. But these are the people you're trying to reach, though, Sarge, because like you just stated, you put more emphasis on women than you do men. Ain't that peculiar?
Her family. You know what I'm saying? I'm like saying Rob got like what, 5 other kids to take care of, right? If Cynthia G, I don't know how he's doing it. I don't know how this household is structured. Like, what do the kids all live underneath the same roof, or like? I mean, when a nigga's getting custody of the kids? What are all the women cool with it? Is he like on some nature boy or polite type of shit where he just all up in the bitches' heads and, just telling them a whole bunch of hotep shit and they just so enamored and they're operating on these sort of alternative systems, which I'm going to get into in another video.
Most
And
likely. It most likely is, man. Robert Perkins, after all, is one of these pseudo neo pro black Negroes who try to run all that conscious bullshit. And he says coon. The amount of times he says coon puts Tariq Nasheed to shame. But you don't take dudes like that seriously, man. You've been doing the same thing. If you've been doing the same thing for 4, 5, 6 years, and you're in the same place, and you can't even say that, hey, at least there's been development in my life or within my content, then you know you're not a good example for black men. But I can say the same thing about Sarge since he's been doing this shit for 10 plus years, 12 years to be exact, at least around. So I digress.